Well, don't call it a comeback. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Justin Goodrum, and I'm here with my co-host Matt Thomas. Welcome back, Matt. Does it seem weird that we're back doing this again under some highly unusual circumstances?
What's up, man? Hey, just like Jordan, we had to come back out of retirement, lay down some new podcasts, show everyone we're still the greatest.
Right? I know. I hope our run goes a little bit better than Jordan did with the Wizards. I mean, he still made the All-Star team. Hopefully, we can recapture our glory days as before. Um,
Well, we're on our second three-P here, so so we're
that's
good.
right, for sure. Just some background in terms of our podcast. The previous edition of our show was breaking down the latest news with the NBA and also breaking down college basketball. That seems like a kind of a lifetime ago. So it's good to get back in the swing of things and really to start doing podcasts again. I want to say a huge thank you to you, Matt, because I just miss doing podcasts. I had another podcast on mixed martial arts and boxing, and I miss doing that one and doing this one with you. So I just want to give you a huge thank you for agreeing to do this again.
Oh, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. I've missed doing podcasts as well, and you want to tell people kind of what has brought us back, if you haven't already guessed by the title of this podcast.
Yeah, so really the origin of this comeback started with our group text message with a bunch of our other friends about the documentary The Last Dance on the final season of the Chicago Bulls dynasty. And so it just popped in my mind even before all of this happened with the early release of the documentary of talking to Matt and see if he would like to do a kind of a short run on all these episodes of the documentary. So he politely agreed. So it got me really excited to kind of get back into it. And since I've been looking forward to this documentary for about 2 years, I think it's really been the perfect time. If you want to get in touch with the show, right now we have our Facebook active. So just type in Triple Double Podcast. That's going to be the easiest way to download all the episodes. There's been some technical difficulties with our old podcast feed and our new one. So the Facebook page is going to be the reliable way of getting all the shows. So just type in Triple Double Podcast. The link will be posted there, or just find Justin Goodrum or Matt Thomas on Facebook, and we'll get you that link as well. So just some background on this documentary real quick. This documentary has been probably the most hyped piece of, I would say, material that ESPN has put out in a long time. I don't remember them hyping up any other documentary or footage like this ever. I mean, the closest thing that comes to mind is the O.J. Simpson documentary they released a few years back. But other than that, this is the most anticipated piece of I guess you would call it a film documentary ever. So the hype, the anticipation, especially under the circumstances now, it's only gotten raised up to a maximum level. This documentary is also supposed to be put out in June, but due to circumstances, ESPN, the documentary filmmakers were nice enough to put this out now. So this is a nice surprise. Without any sports going on, this is pretty much, I was telling Matt, the replacement for the NBA Finals for the time being, basically.
Yeah, just in case you're accessing this podcast a little bit later, we're in the middle of, well, I say middle as if I know the time frame, but we're we're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, of course, we hope everyone is safe and well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is definitely a welcome surprise to get this documentary out right now.
It is. So I guess let's not waste any time and let's get into this documentary.
Well,
The way
actually,
it's aired. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I think maybe to kind of set this up,
Yeah, sure.
I think it'd be good to talk about what this Bulls team means to you and this dynasty has meant to you, because Justin and I went to school together. We are in our our early 30s, so we grew up watching this Bulls team. Um, and so, I mean, I kind of want to let you do most of the talking on this, Justin, because you are a ride or die hardcore Bulls fan.
Sure.
So if you could just maybe take a minute or two to describe kind of what this team was like growing up and what this team means to you. I mean, obviously for you, it's your favorite team, as it is for many in our age group, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll just let you talk about that for a few minutes.
So yeah, Matt's right. This is kind of the team of my childhood. Um, Growing up, I wasn't really into music that much in terms of following a band or kind of the other typical fandom of a child. I mean, the Bulls specifically, the second three-peat was my rock band that I I followed. I knew all the players, watched every game. They were such a iconic um, team of my life, and it really influenced my loyalty to being a Bulls fan, forever. One of the things in saying that, one of the things approaching this documentary and my perspective of watching this, I wanted to really not be biased, and we were talking about this off air. I did not want to come at this documentary with such a hardcore, I guess, knowledge of this team that I have, and that was really difficult to do because there's plenty of people that are one casual fans, two mostly that are they're young people. It's weird saying that I'm 34, but just we live in an entirely new age of social media. And as Scott Van Pelt was saying right now, he's doing Sports Center as we're doing recording this podcast. A lot of people weren't, a lot of kids and teenagers weren't even alive with the Lakers three-peat, let alone the Bulls dynasty in the 90s. So approaching this documentary, I had to really kind of shut off my brain of seeing, these facts that I knew already. Seeing the origin story of Michael Jordan, seeing, all this stuff that I know about from Rodman to Pippen and all this other basic stuff. I had to really kind of give the documentary a chance to really organically explain why this team is so important and the legacy of this team. Because I think to a lot of basketball fans now that are obsessed with Durant, with LeBron, with Steph Curry, um, it's a little bit of a disconnect, and I can relate to that because it's hard to really understand like the Showtime Lakers. I get why they were important, get why they won all those titles, but I didn't live through it. I don't know the magic, no pun intended, of Magic Johnson. I can see the highlights, but it's
Very
different
nice.
watching it. Oh, thank you. It's different, like living through it compared to watching classic games on NBA TV. You kind of had to be there. So I want to cut the documentary a lot of slack in that way because being a hardcore fan, I didn't want to just totally murder it every time they were to recap something that I obviously already know. I mean, they showed all the iconic shots. When Jordan was in Barcelona, the big poster of him, just everybody crying over him. This is stuff that me and you, Matt, already know. I didn't want to penalize it for that, but as the documentary rolls on, kind of my patience ran out, and I'll get to that later on. What was kind of your thoughts? I know you have kind of a different perspective of how you're watching the country.
Yeah, I think this is going to be fun to dive into because this Bulls team was huge. I mean, we graduated from the same class, so we went through a lot of the same things. Let me ask you this: did you ever, in your time growing up, and I definitely have an answer for this, did you ever in your time growing up meet someone else your age who didn't like the Bulls or more specifically, had bad things to say about the Bulls?
I don't think so. I think you know how kids are, right? It was the coolest thing going on. It's hard to be the contrarian, especially in sports, and especially with Michael Jordan. And that's one of the major things in this documentary is that when we were growing up, Matt, it was hard pressed to hear anybody say a bad word about Jordan ever.
Yeah.
And as you see the media now regarding his playing days, it's bizarre because a lot of athletes. You take a look at. I was thinking about this, like Tom Brady with the 9 Super Bowls. He won 6 of them, and still you see plenty of people that are going to talk massive crap about Tom Brady a lot, and not even people that necessarily are just fans of opposing teams that Tom Brady broke their heart. There's plenty of opposition that really played out Tom Brady's legacy, but the guy, I mean, he's been clutch. I mean, it's undeniable what he's done in the NFL. So it's very unique for Michael Jordan to have almost still to this day, from a older media standpoint, from a older fan standpoint, like very much this godlike aura to him that he's almost still shielded from criticism. Now that doesn't extend to his Wizard days or his ownership days, but certainly his playing days, the people that have seen him, he's pretty invulnerable to that. It's pretty incredible. So in terms of the childhood question, it's hard pressed, when I was, growing up, and it's, even as an adult, I don't think that's changed. What's your opinion on it?
Right. I agree with everything you said there. I think I never, when I was a child, now granted, you don't argue about sports as much when you're a kid usually. You're not talking about sports the same way, obviously, as we are now, or at least I would hope not. But that's one thing about this Bulls team. I mean, they were so great that they never really left any cracks in their armor or anything like that, any tarnishes on their legacy in terms of the players, in terms of Phil Jackson. I think, it'll be interesting to see what other stuff is brought up as episodes continue in this documentary. But growing up, I really don't think, to take the great player today of this generation, LeBron, I think we can both agree.
Sure.
There's a lot that even I see middle schoolers, high schoolers being very split. There are Steph Curry jerseys, there are LeBron jerseys. And I think most people that watch basketball, that know the sport, would say, yes, the 2010s belong to LeBron, if you're going to name one player from that decade. But I do think that people, and some of this may be the media, sure, there may be other factors. I think that plays into it, but you can scrutinize LeBron for certain things. I mean, you bring up the decision comes to mind right away. Whether you agree with his decision or not, the way he did it, people feel very differently about, etc. There's a lot of controversy, and that I believe has tarnished his legacy, or has at least tarnished the number of people that would consider him in the greats conversation. Whereas I feel the Bulls, maybe in part because of the media, and we didn't know as much at the time about Jordan's gambling habits and things like that. But it felt like the Bulls were really just rock solid. Like, if the Bulls were in the playoffs, you expected them to win the finals. To me, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. And that was mostly hopping on to the Bulls and getting to see a lot of 96 through 98 especially. I mean, they had that championship mentality established. And so I just kind of wanted to give a little perspective of, maybe what the difference of that era felt like growing up compared to what I see now looking at the sport as an adult. So we can definitely dive into the episodes whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue. And with this documentary, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, with episode 1 and 2, what they're trying to do is, I think, lay out the documentary in two different fragments. So the narrative is that they're telling the story of the last championship the Chicago Bulls won, which is the 1997-1998 season. So
Yep.
basically, a lot of the footage that they've shown has never been seen by the general public before. They had a camera crew videotaping everything, and this footage has never seen the light of day until now. So what they're trying to do is drive the narrative of the 1997-1998 season with really setting up the different storylines of the season that pops up via I would say many documentaries within the documentary. So, for instance, the really what was highly unusual about episode 1-2 was a lot of, I would say, out maybe if I'm being a little bit overreacting here, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of hate towards Jerry Krause immediately. Like,
Yeah.
within the first 10 minutes, which surprised me, especially trying to set all this up. He was the main bad guy. He's the main bad guy so far, episode 1 and 2. Like, you want to cast a villain, he's it. And
they really just dropped him in kind of suddenly.
They did.
Like
They did.
They were talking about Jordan. They were talking about, their run that they had. I kind of had this feeling that, man, is this documentary just going to look at 97, 98? Like, fascinating. We're going to have tons of content we didn't know about. But then, of course, they did wind back the hands of time, so to speak, and start giving more context. But yeah, then Jerry Krause just kind of comes in on the scene, and they start saying like, well, he's a nice guy, but rubs some people the wrong way, etc. I'm sorry, please continue.
No. Well, since we're talking about him, we might as well just elaborate. I want to get your thoughts on this, and maybe I'll do some research, but he's the massive omission from this documentary, big time. You see Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Chicago Bulls, but we don't see Jerry Krause, who was the general manager through all these decisions. Some footage that was from another interview, but in terms of for this documentary, he is not in here. I think that's a big strike against this documentary. Now, he might have been totally against it, but to me, it's a omission very similar to the documentary on the Fab Five of the Michigan Wolverines when Chris Webber was in that documentary. For whatever reason, it's very similar to that. That's a huge strike against this documentary. So because really getting his side of, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just agreeing. Yeah. And I think, you're doing some things that indicate like, hey, this is two-sided, because they did acknowledge the great moves that he made early on, but you're really, really not letting the guy defend himself or give his perspective.
Well, it's bizarre because we really don't know when he gives his reasons specifically from the 97 to 98 season why he wants to break up the team to rebuild. He's saying that he didn't believe a lot of the players would last, but hearing an interview from SportsCenter just happening now, Jackie McMullen, who's a real well-respected reporter from the NBA, she is saying he was wanting to break up the team for years, and that's really unfathomable. Specifically in the 90s, where you have this godlike, iconic player like Michael Jordan. Like he would think you don't want to do anything to really piss this guy off. Instead, he wants to restart and start over again at the risk of alienating, two of the top players in the league, which is bizarre to me. Like, especially as we'll get into later with Scottie Pippen's salary issues. Like, let's just say you want to just, get rid of the rest of the team. Well, you still have Jordan and Pippen you can build around. Because some context to the Bulls in the 90s, and they're in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference, really other than the Pacers and the Knicks, weren't really that good. A very weak conference, in my opinion, especially with this season that preceded the Bulls' last championship. If everybody says that they were to stay together, they would probably win another one. That's true. I mean, and that Knicks team were all right, but they weren't that. The Bulls were taking them out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
with the very similar team. So it's puzzling why Krause had that mentality, and really they paint him as really, I think, somewhat of a narcissist and someone that did not really get the attention of the respect of the rest of the players. And really, I think this was his way of enacting power over them. Because as we'll see in the documentary, Scottie Pippen calling him names, berating him on the team bus. This might have been Krause's way of, getting revenge. I don't know. But I think you're right, Matt. Hearing his perspective, I think would have really, I think, helped this documentary a lot.
Yeah, and that transitions nicely into the first thought that I texted you as we were watching this was, man, this scenario would not unfold in today's NBA. I mean, go
No
back
way.
to our greatest player of the last decade, let's say LeBron. I mean, we've seen instances where he snaps his fingers and a coach is gone.
Oh, yeah.
He
Oh, yeah.
calls the shots, and
Oh, yeah.
and honestly, you have to put a lot of blame, in my opinion, on Jerry Reinsdorf for not
Sure.
stepping in with his authority over Jerry Krause. I just think that there's no way something like this happens today. I mean, Jordan obviously had the will to continue fighting if they hadn't, and the way that he did it too, coming out in that interview that they showed footage of where he just said flat out simply to the reporter, Phil Jackson won't be here next year. This will be Phil Jackson's last year. Just very matter-of-factly.
Unbelievable.
Just puzzling. And, I forgot to mention when we were talking about this team, of course, like many other kids, I was at the time a diehard Bulls fan. Hey, it wasn't easy to do, right? And part of the reason, well, I would say the main reason I didn't continue on with the Bulls was this bizarre decision in the 98 season, after the 98 season, excuse me. It is unprecedented. And I think there are so many things that I want to say to defend Jerry Krause for his time running the Bulls and throughout those years. But man, the way you end your legacy, that was brutal.
I agree. I it's amazing to me with Phil Jackson and the clout that he had, especially at team. I mean, I remember 2 years prior was the greatest team in history at the time, 72-10 regular season, win the title.
Yeah.
They destroyed the Supersonics in the finals, and to fast forward where before the season begins, you want to get rid of Phil Jackson. This is the last season. I just thinking about this now. It reminds me a lot of the Patriots. It's very, very similar to that. But at least with the Patriots, they have the good sense to at least keep Bill Belichick. I mean, somebody. Well, I mean, they got with Brady's gone. At least Belichick is still there.
Yeah, and I think you have to. This is where that Napoleon complex, that as they called it in the documentary, little person complex that Jerry Krause has, it really comes into play, because I think as a GM, you have to realize that in the moment, your legacy isn't going to be realized. Your legacy is going to be realized once those players and coaches are gone from that run. You're going to start getting a lot of credit and accolades for what you did to build that. It's not going to be in the moment. And he obviously just could not handle that. His ego couldn't tolerate that.
No, it's true. What stood out to me in his documentary is, I don't know if you remember, Matt, with the NBA finals, what they would do is they would show, if every playoff, they would do a little bit of a post-game show, and then they would put the post-game show like on MSNBC or like CNBC. I don't know if you remember that. They showed the press conference highlights. So they tell you, hey, go to these networks and you see all the footage of what these guys are talking about in the locker room. And with this, when the Bulls won their title, I don't remember this, but you see Jordan after they won the fifth title, him being very angry with management.
Yeah.
Which I not a very animated Michael Jordan in regards to not having this game break up. That is one highly unusual for Michael Jordan to just have this to be very animated like that after winning a title. And just seeing these clips, I think him being his most honest with the media is him taking his frustrations out on the ownership through the media, which surprised me. That was really fascinating. I want to get, I guess, your thoughts. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, he was always a very buttoned up professional athlete. I mean, he kind of he kind of made the mold of how to handle your business, how to be a professional. And he was not about that off-court drama or things like that. He was all about winning. Say what you want about Jordan, but I do think that holds to this day. I agree with you. It was shocking to see some of that, and I think a lot of those off-court things when we were growing up rooting for the Bulls, we were most interested in seeing the highlights, watching the games in the moments. Sure. We weren't, at least for myself, we weren't really focused on, geez, what's the salary cap next year? How does Pippen fit in the salary cap? That kind of stuff. For me, I wasn't at that age where I was focused on that.
Yeah, agreed. You're right. And I think this is an age of, I would say with myself, I was watching ESPN very occasionally. I really didn't get into SportsCenter until I was, entering high school. That's when I started really watching it. So hearing other opinions didn't really exist in my mind so much. So a lot of the turmoil from, Scotty's contract to just the other issues with management, I had really no idea or very little. I mean, I still hold a grudge against Krause and Reinsdorf ever since I was little. I mean, that was the thing of, everybody knew they were responsible for breaking up the dynasty, but, didn't know the really origins and reasons why. I want to piggyback off your point, Matt, about really Jordan's professionalism. Because again, I'll make some parallels to Kobe. Kobe was very known for not going to clubs, not known for just indulging in that bachelor superstar lifestyle. Really, the origin is really from Michael. They tell the story of him being first drafted. The players are all having a party, and he goes there, and they're taking part in all these illegal activities, and he wants no part of it. And from that point on, he's known for not being a partier, having his own entourage for the most part, stayed away from that type of stuff. I thought that was really interesting because, just hearing that tidbit, that was really the first piece of information that I think was exclusive to this documentary. And that's the kind of stuff that I want more of moving forward, is a lot more of those stories, a lot more of those tidbits. It's so far as it's weird because a lot of the stories and facts I've heard more from different interviews and podcasts and not from this documentary. Kind of more personal stuff, and it hasn't really been in here so far. So I'm hoping that's going to be something that changes as we move forward and watching this documentary.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to zoom out and look at things, you see kind of a formula for success for a great player. And a big part of that, of course, is how do you handle yourself off the court? And I know that sounds so obvious to say, but you had that kind of start with, I would say, Larry Bird in the 80s.
Sure.
Although Magic was very professional as well. I have heard things about, him being, he's a very social, extroverted guy. I'm not saying he was involved in any illegal activity or anything like that. I think he is also a consummate professional. But even if you group those two together, I mean, that's kind of the face of the 80s. very responsible, hardworking guys. 90s, you
Yeah,
get Jordan.
sure.
2000s, you get Kobe. And even in the 2010s, you get LeBron, who off the court, other than social media posts every now and then, he's not really rumored to be like a party guy or strip club guy like other NBA players are.
Yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
I think you see kind of something that you now have a running case that these guys need to be serious and be fully invested in basketball on and off the court. And I know that sounds so obvious to say, but it is really rare to see. And it kind of speaks to maybe the temptation that's there and the power that's there once you become a star NBA player, where a lot
yeah.
of guys have fallen short.
I agree.
I mean, how
So
many
overall,
next
your
MJs
impression,
were there that never panned out?
that's true. And I hate when people say that. That's always irritating to me. That's a pet peeve when
Well,
everybody says,
yeah,
"Oh, the next this or next that." That's I mean, but at the same time, you're right. Now this is an insane amount of pressure. You're grooming him for failure. And really, that was the thing with Kobe. Everybody says, "Oh, he's the next Michael," and really let Kobe organically create to himself. That took a long time. It took honestly some heartbreak and some turmoil for Kobe to develop this mentality. Um, in his
right.
identity onto its own. Despite his similarities with Michael, Kobe was able to really evolve into his own entity. But that took a long, long time, a hell of a long time. Even
Yeah,
with LeBron, that took a long time once he got that label. People really held this animosity towards both Kobe and LeBron for the comparisons, and it wasn't their fault. And they
right.
just had to really grow out of that. So that was really unfortunate.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Matt, overall, your impressions on episode one. I get the sense we kind of differ on both these episodes. What are your overall impressions of the debut?
Yeah, I think there was enough there to keep me excited about future episodes with how it kind of ended and playing that iconic Bulls entrance music and
Sure.
kind of
Well
leading
done.
into that last season, The Last Dance, which of course is the title. Um, I mean, they kind of invented in a way the awesome pregame introduction with the light
Correct.
show and everything. I mean, that was another iconic thing that they haven't touched on to this point. Um,
Good point. Excellent point.
but yeah, I mean, they really made a show out of this, and this was in Chicago. You know, not
Yeah.
a place that's, I mean, certainly a great arts city. But you'd have thought something like this would already be in place, like Madison Square Garden, for example.
It's
But
true.
the Bulls really made it their own, and of course had every right to with all this success that they had. But getting back on point, I think we got a good introduction for those who haven't seen young, springy Michael Jordan, which I often forget a lot of the time too, how
Me
explosive
too.
he was. I mean, that highlight of him in North Carolina, I believe his sophomore year, where he jumps up to block that shot and hits the back of his
Hmm.
head on the backboard as he's flying out of bounds. I mean, just incredible athleticism. I mean, that silly to say, everyone knows that, but I think a lot of people see like the shot and kind of see this guy who's like posting up and bumping people around, and he does that little push off, um,
Sure.
to get that shot off. It looks kind of like slow motion, ISO ball. So it's kind of good to see college Michael Jordan. Good to see early first three-peat. They did a good job of kind of summarizing the overall run, the stakes of things. But I also feel like, um, and I think it's fair being the first episode, but I feel like the first episode I didn't really learn a whole lot. I didn't really um, find too much there that was surprising or eyebrow raising. That didn't anger me very much, but it was just something that I was mostly just excited to relive this nostalgia of the Bulls era. So I was kind of coming into it with a pretty positive outlook. What were your thoughts on the first episode?
Yeah, man. I think we're on the same page. I would say for basketball fans that want to understand why not only Michael Jordan but why the Bulls are this iconic team in sports. I think this is a really solid intro. I would say for everybody else who is up to speed on what's going on, it was a nice appetizer. So I'm like you. I don't think it was a disappointment. However, going into episode two, really the beginning of the episode, I was really a huge fan of. Just pivoting to what they've done with Scottie Pippen, focusing really on him from his injury to his animosity with Jerry Krause to paralleling that with him growing up, all the turmoil he had with his family, how he wasn't really highly recruited going into college, how he, had a huge
grew
growth
5 inches. Yeah.
Yeah, and insane. And just seeing that parallel, I was really excited. And then it just took a turn where they stopped focusing on that and they focused back to Michael. And I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. I mean, it's gigantic. But I felt in this documentary, I had a huge, massive problem in this episode of a lot of very much hero worship with Michael. And I understand he was very much involved in this. Um, and I think maybe that's where his ego maybe got in the way of really producing more content. I feel like with Scotty, we don't really I've got to get to know him a little bit more, but I think overall, um, compared to a lot of the other known players, I would say even Steve Kerr to this point,
Yeah.
Scotty is still an enigma. We don't really know 100% what he's all about, and especially how they explained how one he was he's one of the top 50 players in the NBA. When they explaining how his salary was 122nd in the NBA, he was named to the All NBA team. And just in case people don't know, I believe it was in the '98 season where they tabulated, I think, the top 50 greatest players in NBA history. They brought them all out. They gave them all fancy jackets. Me too. They got all these flashy jackets. I think it was during the NBA Finals. And here you go. You have a guy who's top 50 of all time in the NBA.
Yep.
He has 122nd salary in the NBA. That is unfathomable. Like, even though, again, we're in a different salary cap era. I mean, were they really arguably the number two guy in the NBA to be named, one of the most elite players in history and have such a low salary is just unfathomable. And at this point, we saw a little bit in the documentary of Scotty expressing his anger against Jerry Krause. I wanted the entire episode to be his origin story. Like, I wanted to really get into the minutia of him having anger towards Michael. Like, he touched on it a little bit, but Michael Jordan leaving to go play baseball. We haven't seen really that yet. I think that's a major part of this whole episode with Scotty. Like, that's a huge part of the story. Him having to carry that team by himself. I remember specifically him really taking that mantle. Like, can he be the same as Michael? And again, I'll reserve judgment. I won't kill this documentary until we see the rest of the episodes. I mean, there's 10 episodes, so we'll see what happens. But
if we're there are tears that they need to sew up here.
I agree. And if you don't see that, that's a massive omission in this documentary.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think as someone who grew up, honestly, hero worshiping Michael Jordan as well, during those early years anyway, I think you and I are kind of set on our Jordan content. We feel like we know the career very well. And now, again, I hope this documentary proves me wrong and we get some gems from Jordan. But I think for me, like, I really wanted to hear, like you, I texted you at the start of this episode. I said, awesome, episode 2, the Pippen episode. Let's go. We were both really excited for that. And he gets the opening sequence, which is 15 to 20 minutes on Scottie Pippen. Good chunk of time, definitely not nearly enough.
No,
given all the things that you mentioned and how vital he was to their success, how great of a player he was in his own right, even apart from Jordan.
sure.
And it's just so much more interesting of a storytelling perspective to look through the eyes of that guy who was way underpaid for his value, which, hey, I blame
Agreed.
his agent for. I mean, that was good business for the
Yeah,
Bulls getting him on that salary,
word.
even though,
It's
he's
true.
worth more. Um,
It's true. Good
I
point.
mean,
Good
clearly a
point.
big misstep by his agent, and thankfully he's doing fine today. But uh, that was ludicrous. I remembered him being underpaid. I didn't remember the dramatic extent of how underpaid he was. Um,
Me either.
and I think also, as you mentioned, being Robin for all those years to Michael Jordan's Batman, the and he kind of alluded to, he said like my time will come in kind of a, alluding to, well, one of these days Jordan's going to be gone and I'm going to take over. Uh, and not really mentioning at all how taking over went when Jordan was gone those years of his first retirement. So
Yeah.
I feel like you that it felt, I mean, we were texting LOLs to each other when all of a sudden the documentary pivots and goes to now Michael Jordan growing up in North Carolina. This is how he was raised,
Right.
and I felt like I knew a
Yeah,
lot about
exactly.
him fighting with his brother, him not making the high school team. I mean, that's good stuff, or great stuff for you know kids born in the 2000s and on to hear about because they probably won't know that. But you and I and anyone older than us are going to know all these details. I would bet if you followed basketball even casually during the 90s. So I think I would have the same um, take on the episode as far as the direction went there. I mean, it was um, more Jordan than we probably needed. I'm really hoping that they dive into Scotty a little bit more. It seems like next week, to kind of tease this, we are going to maybe be getting some more of Rodman's perspective, which will be cool since they showed in the the trailer for next week that they're going to be covering their rivalry with the Bad Boys Pistons, which would be awesome.
Yeah. I'll just give some final thoughts, and then I'll let you take them out, whatever else you want to say. A couple of things real quick. A positive of this episode was, seeing Michael call Scotty selfish in terms of the I thought in terms of the whole Jerry Krause and then his salary issue, really insightful. Again, I think the positive thing so far is that if they're looking to make Michael Jordan seem a little bit more human, I think mission accomplished so far. I think we've heard
Yeah,
some honest stories. We heard him cuss. I think that's very refreshing. Kind of seeing the
yeah,
walls come down, refreshing. I think that's so far. I'm happy about that. Um,
agreed.
I am a little bit concerned with the Ramen episode just because we see there's a Ramen documentary ESPN already did, and it's very
Yeah,
extensive, and I thought it was good. So I want less about Rodman's origin story. There's a documentary on that. I want to see other players' opinions on Rodman's behavior. I want to see Michael Jordan's
mm,
opinions on it. I
yeah,
want to kind of see the team react towards Dennis in the context of the season specifically, and also to how the rivalry with the Pistons, how that affects Dennis joining the team in that aspect. That's what I
yes,
want. I don't about him partying. I have a huge kind of I would say knowledge of Rodman in particular because I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. So this Bulls
mm,
dynasty was happening at the exact same time as Rodman going on wrestling and wrestling Karl Malone and him going
yeah,
on the Tonight Show. All these worlds were colliding all at the same exact time. So my knowledge of this is probably more of the average person. I mean, I lived through it once. I got Carmelo's autograph while this was going on too. And then there was another documentary that came out on the WWE Network discussing Dennis Rodman in professional wrestling. So this all I have intimate knowledge. So I think from my perspective, I would like a little bit more on Rodman's antics during the season, as opposed to just explaining going through Rodman's kind of origin all over again. I think that would be really a step back for this documentary, in my opinion. But I can see others being really compelled by it. They've never seen that Rodman documentary.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to do, because of the way they labeled him as kind of like the third great bull of this dynasty. I think, I bet we'll see some origins on him. It's probably going to be, shorter, no longer than a segment, no longer than a Pippin's worth, so to speak. Uh, but I think you hit the nail on the head, for me anyway, as I want to know that dynamic of what was it like when Rodman was thinking about signing with the Bulls, when Rodman was brought in. Was there bad blood that they had to sit down and hash through? Or, I think we'll get the answer from Michael Jordan that'll be, I see Rodman as a guy who can win, who can help us win. So be it, so I can get over the emotions or whatever, or the anger, the bad blood of the past, because he's going to help us win. I think that'll be Jordan's answer would be my prediction. But I want to see some of the other inner workings. Maybe we get something more interesting from some of the guys from the first three-peat, or maybe, Scottie Pippen, who's very vocal, obviously has a media job. Maybe we get some more insight from him as to that dynamic.
Sure. I guess my final thought, and then if you have anything else, Matt, I think I'm good. But I did want to ask you this before we conclude. I saw Trae Young, guard of the Atlanta Hawks, saying that he alluded to now his favorite player is Michael Jordan. Trae Young had a very intimate relationship with Kobe Bryant, but it kind of seems like on Twitter that Trae Young has just switched alliances. I'll see if I can find the exact quote while you're giving your thoughts. But overall, I guess I'm just asking, do you see a lot of, not only younger players, but just younger fans maybe flocking towards Michael, kind of being prisoners of the moment, especially since there's no basketball going on? Or do you think people will just think of Michael Jordan as more of this kind of Babe Ruth, this kind of mythic figure that they can't relate to? They'll appreciate his greatness, but they won't have that same emotional connection as we do.
Yeah, I think I think this is a sign of the times, man, and definitely something that you and I do not really, I guess, appreciate or level with, so to speak. I mean,
Sure.
Trae Young, you see how, like, the relationship he had with Kobe's daughter. Uh, I don't know. To come and say that on social media just feels so trendy, cheap, prisoner of the moment, like you said. And I do think there will be a lot of people who try and act like they know the Bulls like we do. I think that's unavoidable. I mean, especially if we're only looking at these opinions on Twitter, because let's be honest, Twitter's crazy. Uh,
Yeah.
so I do think, and I think for some of the things I was feeling as I was watching, so I can really, only give my perspective for people around my age and maybe a little bit older. But just the appreciation for, this is what hard work looks like. This is what 90s basketball looked like. I think the documentary has done a good job of that so far. Without, there was certainly some hero worship for Jordan, but I don't think it was overwhelming to the point that it was kind of nauseating. Because I do feel like Jordan is blown up to be some type of myth and had no faults. And so, like you said earlier, I'm glad this documentary is a raw, fresh take on some of that stuff. Um, but yeah, I do think um, it's not going to, in my opinion, build up Jordan as much as it's going to, I think, pit people against Bulls ownership and Jerry Krause is what it seems like ultimately this is going to do. Kind of create this outrage of how could you abandon this team?
Yeah, it just seems like they're going to look like major idiots, especially just
And
seeing
maybe
the
deservedly
Bulls
so.
track record. Yeah, I agree. I don't have any sympathy for them. And also, they have 6 titles to their name. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
a complete failure. I mean, they do deserve credit, certainly. But there's plenty of blame where this, this dynasty, this could have been the pinnacle dynasty of sports, period. And it says a lot that they're in a conversation already with everything that's gone on, but due to a lot of things, that's not the case. That's pretty much for me, Matt. Do you have any other final thoughts?
No, I think I'm good, man. We had a lot of stuff that came up these first 2 episodes, and I think it's just going to be interesting to see how they manage to fill in the holes. Um, and I believe this is 8 episodes total for this documentary series.
Uh, I thought it was 10 altogether. Yep, there's 10 parts.
Oh,
So
okay,
we have
okay.
8 more to
So
go.
they certainly have time. So I hope we get a lot more of that raw material. We kind of talked about our hopes for next week. But I think overall, I'm just really excited to learn more about the inner workings of that team as a whole.
Yeah, me too. And just some more kind of those stories. A lot, I watch Open Court on NBA TV. I love that show. It has so many intimate stories. I really hope that kind of uh, feeling and that spirit manifests itself into this documentary a lot more, as opposed to just showing, these iconic games. Like we know about those games. We know about, the Jordan Slam Dunk Contest. I don't think that's necessary to show in this. We know about the Jordan brand. We know about him being this iconic figure. I want to know about this season and just those intimate details, like I'm watching here, just about them making fun of Jerry Krause. That's an awesome, great footage right there about that plays into that power dynamic of that season. That's what I want to see. Less about stuff like you were saying, Matt. We already know to the common basketball fan.
Agreed.
Cool. So that's going to wrap up the show. Again, if you want to get in touch with us for now, our Facebook page is going to be the best way, Triple Double Podcast, just on Facebook. Type that into the search bar. We'll have all our uploaded episodes on there as well. If you just want to relive our glory days, we're still on Stitcher. Type that in there, but hopefully in the next week, we'll go ahead and just make sure that that's updated for you. So stay tuned to our Facebook page for all those updates. So for Matt Thomas, I'm Justin Goodrum. I hope you enjoyed the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance, and we will see you next week.
Take care, you guys. Thanks for listening.